Are you a high-performing parent, entrepreneur, or high achiever in pursuit of excellence? Welcome to The Nexus Podcast, a podcast custom-tailored for families like ours, driven, affluent, and eager to lead extraordinary lives. From rockstar stay-at-home moms to high-producing CEOs, we choose to model success for everyone we are surrounded by. We prioritize health over sickness, embrace a vitalistic lifestyle, and seek to tap into the limitless potential that God has bestowed upon us. I'm Dr. Daniel Kimbley, your host, and on this podcast, we'll uncover the secrets to living a fulfilling and abundant life, where you and your loved ones can thrive physically, mentally, and spiritually. Together, we'll forge a path to greatness and unleash your God-given capabilities. Get ready to say yes to a life of true prosperity and well-being. This is The Nexus Podcast. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And this week, what I want to talk about is something that I get overly passionate about. It's kind of become reignited within me in a lot of ways and for a lot of different reasons, but what I want to talk about on this episode is a little bit more like the nerdy, sciencey stuff. So specifically, I wanted to get some research. I want to get into some physiology about how the brain works and how the body works. But I think most importantly, on top of all that, is talking about a question that came up inside of my practice last week. And we have a wide range of people who we take care of. And primarily, as you heard on the intro, we're taking care of high-performing families, entrepreneurs, the moms and dads, the kiddos, and we take care of whole families. Like, it's no secret that we love to take care of whole families, and there's a very specific reason for that, because we know what the cost of not having kiddos have the care that we provide inside of our office is long term. And now that may sound like grandiose, and it's not to brag about necessarily the care that we have in our office. It's not even really about the care that we have in our office. What it's actually about is setting up the world for the place that we know it could be, for the potential that is there. And it starts with the youngest generation. And so quite frankly, like a lot of you that maybe you're new listening for the first time, maybe you're not, but like a big part of my story is that I quit teaching high school English. And the reason that I quit teaching is because when I started learning about the brain and what happens to the brain in times of stress, I realized that like literally the thing that is causing people all of the issues inside of their lives comes from stress. And it's not just like a big stress of, oh my gosh, I have a deadline at work. And it's not just the big stress of a car accident or a divorce or a breakup in a relationship. Oftentimes what it is, it's the small stresses. It's like looking at blue light on a computer screen. It's the small stress of breathing in pollution every day. It's the small stress of burdening your body with toxins from the foods that we eat. Oftentimes, unless you're very conscious about the food that you eat. A lot of times it could be the stress of like peer pressure. It could be the stress of feeling like you're not good enough, and all this stuff comes from parenting. It comes from a number of places, but the reason I'm not here to like call out any parents, what I want to do is I want to talk about the research on this episode. And this story happened inside of my practice, and I've had this happen many times. So we have an older client who we take care of. He's an amazing guy, kind of a grumpier old dude, like very much in for his pain, and he wants to get out of pain, and he's back to playing the sports that he wants to play. So like, there's this cool result inside of his life, and he's been completely amazed by it, because literally the conversation looked like this. It was like, you know, I can't, I've been to PT, I've been to this place, I've done this therapy, I've done massage, and he's like, nothing works. So like, this is a last resort, I guess I'll try it. And now he's getting results. And part of what I want to explain in this episode is why that's the case. But more importantly than that, I want to talk about the question that he asked. And this is the question that he asked. And I think it's an important question that every single parent asks, and every single parent know the answer to and know what the research says, right? Like, I've been talking about this for years, and there's finally science to support the exact argument that I've been making. And this doesn't only occur in animals, it occurs literally in human beings as well. There's a book by a guy named Paul Tuff where they look at the MRIs of kids' brains, and this is what I want to talk about. So this is the question. This guy, this client of ours, he asked the question, he said, I don't understand. Like, there are, and I got to set the stage for you too, because before I even get into the question, let me just tell you this real quick, because I think it's important. Let me back up for a second. In our office at the 4 o'clock spot, it is insanely chaotic at times. There are multiple families, like families of 4 and 5. There are multiple of them, all the kids playing together, kids having races up and down the hall, people getting adjusted, music loud, lots of family members. There's just a lot going on at the 4 o'clock spot. And slid right in the middle of that 4 o'clock spot is our client who asked this question to me. So he's getting adjusted, and he's literally like, I don't understand why all these kids are in here getting adjusted. He's like, they're happy, like they're playing. They're having fun. Why would they get adjusted? And he goes, especially that little baby over there. So we have an 8-month-old baby who just happened to be in the office getting adjusted, like at the very exact moment that he is asking this question. And when he asks a question, I get into my normal mode of like, because we're setting kids up for optimal brain development and we want to see people be more successful, and the way you're more successful is through the brain, and I get like on this tangent about chiropractic care. What I want to do in this episode is back up and answer the question for you, because this is what we know, is that we know that stress weakens the parts of the brain that are responsible for success, period. Stress hormones weaken the part of the brains that are responsible for success. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail here in a second, but this is what I have to share this with you, is this is what the research says. So they did this study. This is in 1988, by the way. So this is like years and years ago. So this is not some new science that's come out, but they did this study in rats, and this is the title of the study. It's Prenatal Stress Increase Anxiety-Related Behavior and Alters Cerebral Lateralization of Dopamine Activity. So what does this mean? Simply put, it means that when moms are stressed when they are pregnant, those stress hormones negatively affect the function of the brain and the way that the brain releases dopamine before the first breath of life. So to put it simply, it says that dopamine function and anxiety-related behaviors can literally start to be formed and be founded before a kid's first breath of life. This is crucial for everything we do in my office. So when people ask, how can a brand new baby have stress? Why, Dr. Daniel, when a pregnant mom has her baby with you and she continues to stay under care, that you'll take care of that baby for free for the first year of life? The reason is because it's so insanely important, regardless of home birth, regardless of hospital birth, regardless of C-section, regardless of whatever it is, it's so insanely important to make sure that that baby has an opportunity to come out of that stressed out state. Because what we know through the research is that when a child's mother has a stressful birth process, and it could even be before birth, so it could be moves, it could be relationship changes, it could be the dietary, it could be a number of things, right? Is that it doesn't matter where mom's stress comes from. What matters is that when mom has stress, those stress hormones go directly to the baby's developing brain before their first year of life. And when the baby is afflicted with these stress hormones before their first breath of life, that primes their brain to be in a more stressed out state. It primes the brain to be in a more anxious state. It primes the brain to continue to release stress hormones into that baby's system long after they are born. The key to all of this is understanding something that is crucial, is that stress hormones, stress is also known as fight or flight. Those stress hormones are designed to get us up into fight or run away. Can a newborn baby, a brand newborn baby, get up and fight or run away for themselves? They cannot. So what happens is we have these hormones that release into our bodies that literally want us to get up and get in fight mode or runaway mode. Both of those things, fighting and running away, require lots of movement. If we don't move, the brain says, I'm just going to stay in this fight or flight state just until I feel like it's safe for you to come out of it, because if you didn't fight the lion or run away from the lion, then I'm not sure what you're doing, but the threat might still be there, so let me just stay on guard for you. And this is what leads to anxiety. And when we look at anxiety, anxiety comes with a host of challenges, but so many of the kids that I see, the reason that anxiety has its roots in the first place is because stress hormones weaken the right side of the brain. And the right side of the brain is primarily the part of the brain that develops up until the age of 7 years old. And so we have these kids who are born into a stressful world. Mom is stressed out prenatally, and then we fill the kids with vaccines, and we fill the kids with bad food, and we fill the kids with formula, and we do all this stuff, and then we put the pressure on them to be in ballet and gymnastics and dance class and tutoring, and they have to get A's, and they have to start preschool, and they should know their letters by they're 3 years old. Like all this stuff that we put pressure on our kids, and then we wonder why they're super anxious, why they're disconnected, why they want to be in their phones, why they can't make good decisions, why they can't sit still, and it's literally a result of the right side of the brain being weakened. Like if you think of the brain as a muscle, it's like the right side of the brain is literally being weakened every time our body releases these stress hormones or continues to dump them into the system. So the research says that when our kids are born into the world, If mom was stressed out during pregnancy, it is likely that their brains are already functioning less than. Their brains are already weaker on the right side because the right side is what actually helps control blood flow to the left side of the brain. And yes, it's a little bit technical, but the big picture, the point of it is that we bring kids into the world who are more primed to be anxious. We bring kids in the world that are more primed to be stressed out. We bring kids in the world that are more primed already by the nature of the stress hormones floating around in their body to have developmental disorders. This includes language development. This includes emotional connection and eye contact. This includes emotional regulation. This includes grit. This includes them wanting to be curious. This includes them having a drive. This includes curiosity. Like all of these things that matter for someone to be a successful human being, we're literally stripping from our kids before their first breath of life. If mom isn't stressed out, and this is why all the time when I take care of moms, this is what I see. Take care of a pregnant mom in her office. She's like, this is my easiest pregnancy so far. And the baby gets born, and guess what happens? Mom's like, my 3 other kids, they're crazy. This kid, calmest baby I've had. There's no coincidence that the other kids are slightly stressed out and slightly anxious and slightly behavioral issue, and they have a brand new babe born into the world that is just healthy and thriving and different. The reason that they're different is because when we're adjusting mom, we're turning off stress hormones. If we turn off stress hormones for mom, we turn off stress hormones for baby before their first breath of life. We're literally setting kids up to live a more fulfilled, more successful lifestyle later on. So the reason I get passionate about this is because this is what the research says. The research literally tells us that prenatal stress changes the way that the developing baby's brain functions and fires. And the way that we get it to fire differently is to start to strengthen or wake up that brain through the adjustments that we do in our office. There are other ways to do it. Tummy time, cross-crawling, things like that. But if joints of the spine aren't moving well, then the brain is going to continue to stay understimulated. So here's what's interesting. Is that when mom brings the baby into the world and that baby is stressed out. And again, this can come from a number of places. It can come from prenatal stress. It can come from C-section stress. We know that 99% of healthy births have some level of traction on the spinal cord, which creates stress in the system. It can come from a lot of places. So when a baby is born into the world, or anytime any of us have a fight or flight or a stress response inside of our bodies, here's the physiological cascade that happens. The first 2 things that happen is 1, our body releases stress hormones, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. After that, we have increased heart rate, we have increased blood pressure, we have increased blood sugar levels. So when we start to look at kids who have digestive issues, or kids who have an imbalance of their gut bacteria, or kids who have difficulty nursing or don't want mom's breast milk, part of it is because we have increased blood sugar levels and kids are craving different food in the first place. We keep on going, we look at increased fat levels and cholesterol levels, increased blood clotting factors, increased protein breakdown. We have an increase in fear, anxiety, and depression because of the balance of the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain, and what neurotransmitters the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain release. That's a whole other piece of physiology that happens. If we continue, we decrease short-term memory, we decrease ability to concentrate. This is every time our body experiences these stress hormones into our system. And so short-term, you're not gonna notice any of these with a brand new baby. Then we have a kiddo who's 2, whose language is delayed. Maybe they're toe walking. There's all these things that parents see where they're like, wait a second, I'm starting to have questions about how my kid is functioning. Then they get to 3 and they realize they're like, oh my gosh, there are these gross delays. And here's what generally happens is that doctors say, oh, we have concerns about your kid having seizures. We have concerns about your kid having ADD. We have concerns about your kid having autism. And then we start to throw a diagnosis on it, but nobody knew to check for prenatal stress from the time that baby was born. There's one place that does it, and there's one place only that I know that does it, and the only way that we remove that is through movement of the joints of the spine, making sure these brains of these babies are highly developed from the first breath of life, because we know that through the research that prenatal stress changes the way the brain functions. And it decreases or it weakens the part of the brain that is responsible for success in all areas. After we decrease short-term memory and we decrease concentration, we decrease serotonin levels. So when we talk about depression, we talk about fear, it increases pain signals. So we wonder why, my 14-year-old all of a sudden started having all this back pain, but he's only 14 years old. He shouldn't really have back pain. Yeah, part of the reason is probably because front part of the brain was weakened from birth, but because we all live in a sick care model where people say, oh, if you don't have symptoms, then you're healthy, and nobody ever knew to address the brain in the first place. And the part of that brain is addressing, was there prenatal stress? Because we know prenatal stress negatively affects the brain, and it will continue to through every phase of life unless it's addressed. And sometimes it doesn't show up until 40. Sometimes it doesn't show up until later, but every time it's going to show up. And we decrease growth hormone and testosterone, and we lose bone. So if we just think about like the big killers in the US. So ignore the kids for a second, right? Like ignore academic success, ignore connection, ignore the diagnoses of ADD and autism and all the things that just continue to increase over time. If we look at adults for a moment and we think about what are the big killers in the United States today. So the first two things, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, that stress hormones do, that sounds a lot like cardiovascular disease long term. We increase blood sugar levels. Increased blood sugar levels is literally diabetes. And then we go into increased blood fat and cholesterol levels. So we wonder why people have high cholesterol. Like part of it's because of the food that they're eating, but our body produces more cholesterol than the food that we can eat in the first place by like 4 times. And so when we look at these things and we start to look at, oh, these are the lifestyle killers, we know that sugar, blood sugar, feeds cancer cells. And so when we start to break this down, we can literally look at the physiology of a stress response is what's causing disease, which means something very interesting, and this is the important piece, is that the symptoms that you or your child or your loved one are experiencing are a normal response to stress stuck on in the body. Meaning that your body's stress response, the stress response of the body, is primarily responsible for the symptoms that we would experience. And if we can turn off that stress response, we can bring the body back into rest and digest. We can bring the body back into healing. We can turn off the flood of stress hormones and we can allow the body to reverse the symptomatology that is there. And it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It doesn't matter if it's fibromyalgia. It doesn't matter if it's low energy. It doesn't matter if it's pain. It doesn't matter if it's digestive issues. It doesn't matter if it's ADD or ADHD. It doesn't matter if it's anxiety. It doesn't matter if it's bipolar. It doesn't matter if it's depression. Like it doesn't matter if it's seizures. Whatever the diagnosis is in the traditional sick care model, the only reason that diagnosis is there is because we know that the neurophysiology of the stress response negatively affects the brain and starts to cause all the issues in the first place, meaning that the cause is actually the cure. So we don't need to remove stress from someone's life. We need to allow them to be able to adapt to it because I want people to be able to take on more stress. And so when we talk about literally like setting up a healthier generation, like seeing kids be successful for the first time in their lives, seeing kids be free from these diagnoses. We're working with a 2-year-old right now. Literally mom and dad come in, they have concerns. They're like, they want to diagnose him with autism already, 2 years old, which I don't even think is possible in the first place, but that's what they try to do to scare these parents into giving them medications. And anyway, that's a whole different conversation for a different podcast. 2-year-old comes into our office, diagnosis of autism. We start working with him, goes back to the specialist. The specialist is like, we don't see any of these signs of autism anymore. We don't think he has that. Why? Because we woke up his neurological system, because we started to strengthen and increase the right side of his brain. Guess what? Mom was super stressed out during her pregnancy. Like super stressed out during the pregnancy. I see this all the time. And the reason that I care, the reason that this matters, the reason that I share it with you, the reason that the guy asked this question is because we have all been taught in a world, for the most part, that if we do not have symptoms, then we are healthy. Except for the fact that we know that if these kids are born into a world where they are more stressed out because there was prenatal stress during pregnancy, that is setting them up to have a stress response that's stuck on in their system, and the only way to turn it off is to address the brain, address the neurological system. And there are very, very few ways that can actually address the neurological system. So my friends, I ask you one simple question. Is like, how do you know whether your brain and nervous system is functioning well or not? How do you know whether the brain and nervous system of your child or your loved one or the people that you care about is developing well or not? And there's only one way, and that's to have it checked. And that's all I ask. Is like, if you see these symptoms, maybe consider that they're not actually bad. It's the body's natural response to stress. And if we can turn off that stress, we can allow the body to start to thrive again. That's what we do inside of my office. That's what I'm so passionate about, because we see people heal. We heal them on their own. Like, it's not me as a doctor. I'm not the healer. I'm not the fixer. I can't fix anyone. The body only knows how to fix itself, but it cannot do it in that fight or flight or stressed out state. My friends, that's all I have for you on this episode. I love you. I appreciate you. Hope you got some value out of it. And you know I'll come at you again next week. Peace.